I'm ready to start dressing this thing up. I sanded around the edges to smooth them up a little bit so they give it a little tooth to hold the paint. These things were originally all chrome, and they painted the black paint and the wood grain over top the chrome. When you sand through the through the black paint, you can see the chrome beneath it. The wood grain in this dash has a few chips in it that you can see the chrome through. There's one here, over here. I tried to color the things with these furniture repair markers. They're just magic markers, tile things, but they're in the color of wood grains, and I've got several different colors here, but I could never find one that truly, when you put it on, it blends in with the wood. Not to mention, the wood has striations in it, and in the striations is a darker color, so when you cover the wood grain with a marker or paint or anything else, you're going to lose the striations in it. I think what I'm going to have to do, if I really want to do this thing completely, I'm going to have to mask this off, find a brown tone paint that sort of matches this wood color as best I can, and then just paint a light coat over top the whole thing. Then go back maybe and use one of these darker markers and highlight the striations in it. So I'll see how that works out. I masked up the chrome areas and the black areas with some fine line tape, and then sprayed the whole thing with some Rust-Oleum brown satin finish paint. Once that dried, I took some black leather shoe dye and got it on a cloth and mopped it all over the wood grain area. The idea being that the black shoe dye is real thin, it would settle into the grain that was printed into the plastic casing, and so I mopped up the whole thing. I let it dry. Once it got tacky, not dry, but tacky, or it was still somewhat of a liquid state. You have to just catch it at the right minute, just before it dries up. Then I go back over it with a cloth and just wiped off the excess. And I think it worked pretty well. If I were to do it again, the only thing I would do this time is I'd start with a lighter color brown paint, because the black dye left a layer of black over everything, as well as into the grooves that were printed into the panel. So I think I got the effect I wanted. The wood's a little darker, but we're going to go with it rather than clean it up and repainting it. We're going to go with that. I let this dry overnight, and then the next morning when I came out and looked at it, I decided that the brown was too dark. So I took some alcohol and cleaned off all the remaining residue of the black shoe dye. As it turned out, enough residue remained in the grained section of the wood, and I decided I was satisfied with it then. So I masked it off and painted it with a coat of clear satin. The brown I used was a flat brown, and the satin gives it a little more polished wood look. After I let that dry for several days, because any areas that I tape up, I don't want the tape to pull the fresh paint off, because there's so many areas that you have to paint and then mask off and then paint some more and mask off some more, and I didn't want fresh paint being pulled off. So after it dried for about 4 days, then I came and masked it off, and I painted all the black areas up in here and around this edge here. Inside the gauges. And now I'll let it set for a couple of more days, and I'll begin masking it off to paint the silver on it. And the silver, of course, is going to go around this edge. And then around the gauges, I'll probably do that with a silver paint pen. But then around all these outside edges will be silver, and this inside lip right here. So that's quite a bit of masking that I'll have to do to get the silver painted on it. And I may do it in 2 stages. I masked off this whole thing and painted it, and when I painted the silver it reacted with the existing black that was in there and bubbled all up. So now I'm having to go back and sand it down and get it smooth, try and get all the way to the plastic if I can. This area here is not silver paint, that's the original chrome that's in there. But I'm having to go around here and sand this whole area in sand it down and get it smooth again so that I can go back and paint it black, and I'll have to try and make sure that my paints don't react with each other, so I'll have to get some different paint. Well, there's my painting finished up. I'm satisfied with it. It's not the bright silver. It's more of a satin silver, but it doesn't react with the other paints, and it didn't bleed underneath the tape as bad. So I'm pretty much satisfied with that. The next thing I'm working on is I'm creating a lens to go in here. This used to be the fasten seatbelt lens. I'm going to create a lens to go in here. I'm using some P-Touch labeling, white letters on clear tape. I'll put it on a piece of red lens and mount it, and when it's and then when the light shines behind it, it'll look something like this. The next thing I need to do is create a label for this plate here. This one goes behind what used to be the oil and brake light. Were both in the same hole, and it said oil and brake. So what I need to do, I've sanded it down, painted it black, and I'm going to use the same P-Touch system to put oil PSI. I think it'll fit in there. I did it with 1/4-inch vinyl letters, and they look really good, except that they did not match this over here very well. And I wasn't happy with the mismatch, so I decided to try the P-Touch label instead. I traced the old fasten seatbelt lens onto this red plastic, and now I'll clean it up, make sure it fits, and then I'll put the brake label over it. Well, I finally completed this thing. It's been a lot of setbacks. It's taken a lot of time, a lot of masking and painting and then remasking and painting. If I had any takeaways from this, it would be I would use 2-part epoxy paints because I think they'd stick better and be less likelihood of pulling the paint up when you peel your masking tapes off. The other thing I would do, I would get some better quality masking tape, I think, than what I've got. Maybe even pinstripe tape. I soldered this lead from the circuit board on where the brake light is over to, it's just loose right now. What we'll do is tie that into the light that used to say fasten seat belts. We'll tie that into that bulb, plug it into the back here, and then it'll come on when you press the brake pedal. I painted the surface of this red lens that I put in here satin black, and when the light shines through it, it shows up the word brake on a red background. There's my voltmeter. And there's my oil pressure gauge. The oil pressure, you can just barely see the needle that pops up when you turn the key on. But that's it. Thanks.